you went to Columbia for Columbia, Missouri for broadcast journalism. What inspired you to kind of get into that, and then what then made you? Because did you go with the idea of being an on-air personality, or did you always think you'd be a teacher and then you went into education? Like, how did that come about?
The education thing was totally accidental.
Okay.
But the program that I went through in high school was an intensive performing arts program. So it was theater and film and television, really great program, public school, but just this really unique program. And so that really got me excited about video production and about being on air and reporting and anchoring and all those things. So I just kind of didn't really know what I wanted to do, and I fell into that in high school after I gave up my dreams of being a professional baseball player. I realized that maybe I needed to do something else, so kind of stumbled into theater and television production and all those things. So yeah, I thought that I wanted to be a sportscaster is actually what I thought I wanted to do, to take that love of sports, and then it kind of turned to news, kind of moved away from the sports thing, and was interested in news, and then decided that when there was an opportunity to go back to my high school, my teacher and director in that program, he had kind of a tradition of hiring students that had been with him as, to come in and be young teachers for a year and just, help him fill a role. And of course, he knew that they, came back knowing the program and that they're, 22 years old, they could kind of come in and just, work the crazy hours. And so he took advantage of that, and we were happy to do it. And so I was the first one who stayed more than a year, though. Most of them came and they then went on to do something else. Probably the most famous one to do that is Chris Parnell, who was on Saturday Night Live for several years and still shows up in different productions and different movies. He did it for a year, actually, when I was a high school student, and then went on and did SNL and some other things. But that did not happen to me. I stayed for 5 years and in the trenches and helped shape young minds. And so I didn't know that I wanted to be an educator, but that was something that just kind of happened by accident.
That's kind of neat, though, that you had an experience with somebody who then went on to become a well-known professional performer.
For sure.
I always joke with kids in my office. I ask every young person in my office a number of questions. One of them is, what do you think you want to be when you grow up? And, a lot of them will say they want to be professional athletes, or they want to be actors, or they want to be something like that. And I always say to them, just remember, when you grow up, if you can, get me Bears tickets or something like that I was nice to you when you were a kid. The parents always scoff when I say that. And so, but I always say this, somebody knew all the people in the NFL and the NBA and on Broadway when they were children.
Before they were somebody. That's right.
So, I figure I'm hedging my bets with that.
Yes.
Because I have a background in theater. I did pretty well in theater when I went to New York as a young man. So, not to the level of being on SNL or anything, but it never hurts. And so you knew a guy that was on SNL, and this is why I like things like this, why a show like this evolves, because you meet people that know people, and you get kind of interesting stories. So then you were teaching drama, or what were you teaching?
I was teaching Introduction to Film and Video, and this is in the late 90s through like 2002, 2003 school year. And so our program was really unique in that it was really a 4-year curriculum in a public high school. So you had kids, so my first year I'm 22 years old and, looked like I was 16, and I'm teaching kids somewhere in the shirt and tie every day just to make sure that I don't get confused as a student, which did happen. It's a whole nother story. And so I'm teaching a range of students in that intro class because they're able to get their fine arts credit. So you've got kids that waited until their senior year. They didn't want to take choir. They didn't want to take visual art, whatever the case might be. And so they end up in my class. So I've got kids that are like 18, 19 years old trying to just get that fine arts credit. And then I have the 14, 15-year-old who's just psyched to be able to take something like this in high school. And so some of those kids then went on to take our upper level production classes and go all the way through and run our TV studio. We ran the cable TV station for our community. And, so they had this incredible experience if they, were able to take advantage of that all the way through. And it was an intensive program. And of course, as you can imagine, the same kids who were doing all the TV productions in the morning news show, and they're also doing theater at night and, running lights and sound for that, or on stage, or whatever the case might be. And so, so I was teaching as a part of a team of teachers too in those higher level classes. So my core class was Intro to Film and Video, where we did the history of film, starting way back at the very earliest stages of that. And then in the second semester, they were actually producing shows like this.
Nice.
And so a really neat a really neat experience there for them. So that was really rewarding work, especially as a young person straight out of school, and to see that program through another lens and be able to help them in that way was really super cool. So it was definitely a young person's job, though, as you can imagine.
Yeah.
So I was there like kind of in my mid-20s, and it was great, and just great friendships. One of my best friends, still to this day, we taught in classrooms next door to each other, and ended up playing music together, and just had this, very close bond. So.
And that was in the late 90s and early 2000s?
Yes, yeah. So it was an interesting time when you think about, kind of the evolution of digital video and the internet and just how we get our content. It was crazy. So we were doing nonlinear digital editing at that point, but it was still very new. So we were teaching kids the old school way, kind of tape to tape and A/B roll and all those techniques, but then also teaching them how to edit on a nonlinear, digital editing system as well. So pretty cool stuff. Am I speaking your language?
I assume you know what that means, because it was where you went with that was what I was thinking, which is, so I graduated from high school in the late 90s, and then I was thinking about how young he is, and about how, the first email address I ever got was assigned to me as a freshman at Drake in 1998. Something like that.
Yep.
And then the internet was around. I remember playing with it in high school, the really slow dial-up. But then I was thinking about the first time I ever heard of YouTube would have been in the mid, what do we call it, the zeros? The aughts,
Yep.
And so that, you were right in that time frame when the internet was like going to have this nuclear explosion of then, I mean, what a time to be, like you say, you went from the tapes to right into just catapulted into the digital age.
For sure. And even if if I go back to my college career, so I was at Mizzou from 94 to 98. And one of the things I love about Mizzou is just the foundation that you get. So you don't go into a journalism class, even if you know that's what you want to do, you don't get into the journalism school until really officially until your junior year. And you can take some classes your sophomore year, but they want to make sure you get that good, strong, liberal arts base. And then, take news writing and history of journalism and communications. And so that really strong base. But by 98, and I'm in broadcast, so I'm doing radio and TV. And I'm thinking, yeah, that's what I want to do. One of those two. And they're like, oh, and by the way, you have to produce a web story, this semester. And I'm like, thought my head was going to explode, and HTML and all this, And I remember laboring over that. So I took a news story that I'd done for TV, for KOMU TV, which is the NBC affiliate in Columbia. And they said, okay, now you have to put it online. And and nowadays, of course, that would just be
click.
Yes. And every student is doing that. They're producing their story in 3 different formats, and they're putting it online before they leave the studio at night. And it's now multimedia journalists. It's not, a television journalist, or, it's, you do it all. And, so that transition was already happening, but it was a really exciting time to be then fast forwarding to when I was teaching to be teaching that. And really, we insisted, though, of course, like in the film classes, we insisted they'd still shot on Super 8 or 8mm film, and they spliced and, taped and cemented or whatever and put their films together. And most of them were really rough, as you can imagine, but we kind of insisted on.
Still cool, though.
Yeah, it was aesthetically it's cool, and it really gives you a sense. And you think about linear editing of videotape, you really have to think through, how do we put this thing together? It's not just dragging whatever. So I mean, there is that kind of, and not that that's not a great way to do it, because it's revolutionized the industry and what people can do in terms of producing content, but we felt like it was important, to make sure that they knew how to do that. So it was an exciting time, but there was also that sense of like the internet and what that meant in our lives that I don't think any of us really knew. So in that early era,
how could we have?
Right. And so all of a sudden, this is a little bit of a funny story, and I won't name any names because some of my students, who knows, they might end up watching this show.
I hope they do, and subscribe.
There you go. Yeah, good plug there. So they were doing film reports every 6 weeks. We had 6-week grading periods, and they had to do a film report. And it was pretty obvious when you knew a kid maybe was using words that were not his or her own. And so I learned really early on that I could just put it in Google or Yahoo or whatever the search engine was at the time, and there it was. And we're just finding these like huge chunks of text. So I think it's really interesting, and that's still happening, obviously, from a and it's upsetting to know that continues. But kids have always found ways to get around things, and we've all been there. But it was really interesting to just see that kind of evolve, and I was like, I'd be way behind now if I tried to bust a kid doing something like that. But at that time, it was like, whew, kind of, and you hated delivering that news, but
that technology's gotten better on the other side as well. So I got busted for cheating in my ethics class.
Cheating in ethics.
Wow.
Hey,
man, that's rich.
It's if it swings too far, you should almost get an A for that. Like if you go too far out there.
I just hated the concept of secondary education, and I thought the class was stupid, and the professor was some weird guy with a weird beard that didn't make any sense, and I was like,
sure.
You know what, this is a waste of my time. I'm gonna go learn something valuable on my own.
Yeah.
Besides sitting here and listening to this guy talk to me about the ancient Greek.
Yeah.
Ethics and philosophy. Not that it's
all the
important.
stuff that I enjoy reading, right?
Well, I was broke at the time and worried about trying to make money, so that's still
sure.
focused.
Cooper Hopkins is against weird guys with weird beards. I'm not
against them.
Let the world know that.
I don't want to pay to have them tell me to go home and read 40 pages a night.
Sure.